Some of the challenges people think, or most economists or economic analysts think that he's likely going to face, as a central bank governor, is managing the foreign reserve, which we have seen gone down as low as $36 billion, and we have the naira being under pressure for some time. How do you think he can deal with these?
There are a whole lot of issues relating to foreign exchange rate management, and external reserves is just one of them. But more importantly there is the fact that the particular volume that we have, the stock of external reserves, the central bank in reality has no control over it, because it is dictated, one, by the structure of our economy, and then the interplay between foreign inflows and outflows. Now, if we have more of outflows than inflows, that means there will be no accretion to reserve. Rather than accruing to reserve, you actually be depleting reserve, which is what we have experienced in recent times. Now, if that is going to grow, that means a lot more is being earned by the economy, less than what we're actually paying out for what we require, in which case we can talk about accretion to reserve. So in all reality, that very stock of external reserves is not within the control of the Central Bank of Nigeria. And that's one thing I think Nigerians need to understand. Now, the other side to it is, what role can the Central Bank itself play in influencing the change in the structure of the Nigerian economy in such a way that our demand for foreign goods will drop? Of course, you can't do anything about demand. It is driven by need, all right? How about the supply side? And that again, you say, how do we boost the supply of foreign currencies? Now, that will depend largely on what you export and then the collection of the payments for those exports on the one hand. Then on the other hand, is there a possibility of bringing in policy that will encourage domestic manufacturing? Because the more you produce domestically, the less you depend on foreign currencies in order to buy inputs, and machineries and the rest of it. So if that is the case, then that means the demand for foreign currencies will drop if you produce more domestically. So if that demand drops, that means whatever we can sell and convert into currencies will, of course, play very well against our demand, and then we see an accretion to reserve. So in which case, his own attention should not be, so much about the quantum of foreign reserves, because central bank really has no control over that. Rather, what he should focus on is whatever government policies we have in respect of fiscal policies, in respect also of commercial policy. What is the government doing in that regard? How do we line up monetary policy to keep those in line with domestic manufacturing, which will now boost the ability to generate foreign exchange on the one hand, and also reduce the need for foreign currencies? Now, look at the other side, which connects to where we started from, his mention of development banking. And that will now come into job creation domestically. Because if the central bank will bring in policies that will encourage domestic manufacturing, that means you create jobs locally. And if you create jobs locally, that means ordinarily what would have gone into paying for imports, which had been creating jobs abroad, will now be retained internally. So you grow your reserves, and at the same time you are creating jobs to bridge the gap between growth and development.
Now, if that be the case, why is it that some economists think that the best option is actually to adjust the naira band if we must raise the foreign reserve? And if that is done now, well, that's okay. But if it's left to be done much later, then it might likely actually lead to devaluation.
The reality of it is, if one looks back at the management of the Nigerian economy, let's just date it back to about 1974, in which case we look back at some 40 years ago. Now, if you look back 40 years ago, you notice that the exchange value of the Nigerian currency, the naira, has always followed the pattern of the interplay between demand and supply of foreign currencies. Now, for an economy that is import dependent when it relates to non-goods and services, you find that constantly that demand had been there and growing with the economy, which is to mean as the economy was growing, the demand for foreign currencies was also growing. But we're not growing the supply from domestic economic activities as was expected. So therefore, we were a net importer of non-air goods and services. So to that extent, demand remained there. And over time, therefore, the pattern had been that once the difference between the official rate of exchange and what you get at the roadside, what you commonly call the parallel market, once the difference between them, which you call the premium technically, is above 5%, then we say that yes, that will encourage round tripping. People making all possible efforts to get official dollars and go to sell at the roadside at the parallel market rate. Now that brings a lot of, what you call a strange opportunity for money making. In economics, we call it rent seeking. All right? Now that doesn't create value. It is just taking an advantage of an aberration in the market. Now when you do that, you are making money that has nothing to do with economic value created. And of course, the response of the government will be that the reason people do that is because they see an incentive in that premium. So let's close that gap. So they now raise the official exchange rate to reduce that premium within the maximum of 5% recommended for exchange rate management. Now, when you do that, that will only succeed for a little while because the cause of it, the underlying cause, is the structure of your economy and the huge dependence on imports. So in the course of time, so that's why I liken it to a moving average. Now, as it moves, again, that gap comes. You bridge the gap. And that is how the Naira has lost value over time. On occasions, through depreciation, which is driven by the reality of the parallel market, which of course we say is the real, where you get the real exchange value of the Naira. Now, official has been at many occasions in the past, had been artificial. So now, you increase the official to bridge the gap, and then in the course of time, parallel market rate moves again. Now, it will continue like that persistently, even if we now devalue the Naira today, and some are advising that the central bank governor should do. We still get the same effect, or it's until the structure of our economy changes. Otherwise, each time we devalue the Naira, of course, at the parallel market, it will depreciate again. That premium will grow again beyond 5%. Then there's a need again to devalue the official, Naira. And so you continue that journey until you do something specific about the structure of the economy. So my advice to him is not to hurry to devalue the Naira, even though the indication for those who are panicking that, what we have as external reserves is very close to the threshold of 6 months impulse bill. Yes, that would be worrisome to anybody. But again, there are many factors to be considered before you make such a decision. I must not also forget, this is an economy that is largely import dependent. So to that extent, if you devalue the Naira, the inflationary implication also is there as well. The cost of goods and services, commodities generally, will also go up because that will be factored into their pricing. And of course, that comes back to you and I in terms of higher rate of inflation.
Well, he has said that devaluation is not an option for him, and you seem to agree with that.
I support that view, in the light of historical evidence and also where we are as at today.